So this is just a quick video to review what we covered in our talk. This is really the way to unhook with the pattern and the habitual way of perceiving who we are by recognizing the core of where it lives within us. So we really want to let go of the habit, the pattern, and the identities that we used to live with that we based on a coping mechanism as a response to stress. So how that works is we want to have a deep understanding that when a child is in an environment where their parent does not know how to love themselves, they pass that wound on to the child. So children's brains are in a hypnotic brainwave pattern. Before the age of 7, they're in delta and theta brainwaves. So children do not perceive themselves as separate from their environment. And children are incredibly powerful empaths. They feel everything. Nothing can be hidden from them. So when you're in that hypnotic brainwave state and you're not separate, when you are witnessing the pain and suffering inside the parent who doesn't know how to love themselves, the transmission of meaning in terms of who we are is, I am not lovable. I am unworthy of love. And that creates a split because before that message is perceived, the child is innate love, all of us. So when we're responding to stress and we're seeing an unloving habitual pattern or message in our environment from our caregiver that doesn't know how to demonstrate that love because they don't love themselves, then the child instantly believes, I am my environment. My environment is my identity. I am unworthy of love. So they get disconnected from the source of who they are. And this is universal. This is everybody I've ever worked with has had this imprint. And universal means it applies to all of us. So we have to break that habitual belief. And the only way to do that is to actually bring it to awareness. Awareness means the light of consciousness. The minute it's taken out of being in an unaware, hidden place, then we're starting to return to our power. So it cannot stay hidden. Otherwise, it controls us and it dominates our beliefs and choices in that hidden space. So the first stage is bringing it to awareness, being willing to look right at it and understand that was just the way that the brain is organized, and it's not the truth. And you really have to acknowledge it's not the truth. The next thing is to understand that those habitual environments, the way the brain works, is that when something is repeated, it creates a neural pathway. So neural pathways are just that. It's an environment and a pathway that is triggering again and again and again. So when we're in that habitual space of a parent not being able to relay their self-love back onto us through a long period of time, we develop a pathway in the brain that is always going into that place of the pain body and suffering of the child who suddenly feels this void of love inside of themselves. And those neural pathways, because they're familiar and they have been repeated over a long period of time, we continue to repeat them as adults, and we essentially become addicts to pain because what is familiar is recognized in the brain as comfort. What is familiar is recognized as home, as normal. It becomes like our skin. We don't even see it. It's a part of our being. And so we have to bring it into this space of awareness completely and actually bring it closer and become more intimate with it, not resist it, reject it, or judge it, or push it away. Because then that fear that we have towards it, that judgment, gives it power to control our lives. So these neural pathways can be, the brain has plasticity, and what that means is it's changeable, it's mutable. we can reprogram the brain. So this is just to have an understanding. We should not have shame about having this, imprint. This is actually the whole collective consciousness, according to dozens of prophecies from ancient wisdom lineages, is talking about this moment in time, going through basically the healing of this very universal imprint. Because what they say is that the wounded masculine, or the patriarchy, which is the separation from love, has existed for thousands of years. So this has literally been passed on from generation to generation in our bloodline for a very long time. It's not anybody's fault. But they didn't have the skills and the tools to deal with it in our ancestral lineage. They persevered the best that they could with what they knew. They always did the best that they could. The truth is that this light of this love that we all are exists in this core of our being, and it becomes sovereign when we own it and claim it and return to it. But that takes a little bit of work in the beginning. It takes not, you're not trying to become love, you're trying to remove the distortion of what you truly are. So you're letting go of something. You're not trying to become. You already are love. You're unveiling the truth of who you are. You're not changing who you are. You're letting go of who you are not. So that's a really important distinction as well. So how do we actually change? How do we actually stop repeating this same process? One is this transmission of wisdom to understand how this exists, which is what we're going over right now. And then the other is to step right into the process. So first we shine a light of awareness on it, and then we acknowledge this lives within me. I own it. The relationships I have are a mirror of this void of love within me, and which is a false perception that I carry. And events in my life are also mirroring that. So it can affect any area of our life, whether it's loving partnerships, family relationships, our health, our sense of confidence, our ability to feel tapped into our creativity, to believe in our sense of inner authority, to create the life of purpose that we want, to be inspired, the work that we do in the world, the kind of money we make. It can affect every external thing is going to mirror back to us that internal belief. So we want to return to our source of the power that we are. That's the journey, that's the practices that we talked about, is to begin that journey. And this takes time. So we all have to step into starting to unveil. That's really what the collective needs to step into, to come back into this natural receptive yin force, which has been out of balance for so long. This surrender, this openness, this connection to our empathy, our love. And this is the yin power, the yin treasure that lives within all of us. So in order to love ourselves unconditionally, even the tender, vulnerable parts of ourselves, and not to reject them anymore, not to judge them, not to try to force them to change. That's the kind of, ironic thing about this. It's that by not trying to change it, but by witnessing it and understanding it with compassion, that fragmented part integrates. But if we start doing all these spiritual platitudes and kind of new agey things where we're like, I should think positive, what we're doing is rejecting that part deeper, and that's giving it more control. So it seems a little counterintuitive to do this in the beginning, but you're literally integrating a fragmented part only by loving it exactly in the state that it's in. So find the wisdom within, those feelings of hopelessness or anger or unworthiness. They're trying to tell you something about what they really need, about who they really are down in the core. You can't blame and shame those emotions. So when, I had a hardcore, heavy rescuer identity, and I know a lot of people have seen that side of themselves, but my inner child thought that if I didn't play the role of rescuer, I would die. And this is another aspect. It can be really programmed into the survival mechanism of the brain, which is, the reptilian and mammalian brain, the less evolved regions of our brain. And if we think we're going to die, if we let this go, then we defend it. We see it as a benefit. And a lot of children before the age of 4 and 5, when they're not being given love, if it's to an extreme enough degree, they can start going into that space of thinking, if I don't play this role and play by this rule, then without this external game of trying to get love from outside of me, if I don't control the situation and defend myself, or play this role or play this game, then I could die. Because if love is perceived as being taken away to that degree for some reason, and in a lot of cases this lies in our unconsciousness, if our particular circumstance was that extreme, on the spectrum of feeling like we were disconnected, we can hold on and grip onto those roles and those identities really tightly, even if we're trying to be vigilant and let them go, because the brain is always weighing benefit and risks. And if the brain thinks this is a survival mechanism, you think I'm going to let this go? You need to shine a light of awareness on that as well. And there is a component we'll talk about where you're not doing this alone. You can't think your way out of this. You have to surrender this to the universe, to the light, essentially, or whatever word you like to give it. You have an alliance working on your behalf, because this is the exact thing, is aligned with the purpose of the universal law of our being, that we are becoming light, so that we couldn't have more support for anything than to step into this process. It's supported more than when any other intention you could possibly have, to let go of a false distortion so that you can perceive the truth of who you are, which is that love, that light, and source your life in the core of your being from that space. So we want to understand that we are surrendering this through a willing process where we're meeting the universe, the light, the divine halfway through our own intention and our own power and our own choices. So the way that we want to do that is, okay, I'm shining the light of awareness on it. I'm going to go deeper and deeper into seeing this at the core of where it lives within me. I know this habitual story of pain that arises within me. I've recognized that my brain has an addiction to it, and that I'm seeking an external source to validate this void inside of me, whether that's playing a role or trying to get the external world to constantly validate us through some kind of identity. So this is where people come up with all sorts of addictions, and even types of addictions that are validated as beneficial, like making money, being addicted to work, being addicted to codependent relationships. Some of those things look rewarding on the surface, but they're actually damaging, because we're constantly trying to get something externally, and we haven't yet touched that core of worthiness and love. You cannot be unworthy of love, because you are love. That's the basis of this practice. So when we feel that emotion, it's not just that we're going to wallow in pain by bringing it closer. We're actually going to look right at it and recognize that it's just a confused perception. And we're going to allow it to be held in a space of unconditional, complete love. So you've done the process, you're going in, you're owning it, you're bringing it to awareness. Continue doing that over time. It doesn't happen all at once. And then what you want to do basically is realize your brain, if it thinks that there's a benefit, you need to look at that false perception. You need to look at how destructive this is, and not let your brain fool you into thinking it's a benefit, because your brain will fight you and will not let go if it thinks that it's always weighing, as we said, risk and benefit. Your brain is designed to do that. So, a lot of the response when we get right into the core of this pain is that we want to avoid it. We want to think positive. We want to run. We want to fight it. We judge it. We feel a lot of shame and discomfort come to the surface. We feel a lot of resentment. Sometimes we even recognize that the people that we judge at the core have this same imprint inside of them, which is the place we judge in ourselves. And even though they behave differently in their coping mechanisms and they can be really harmful to other people, and we don't behave that way, we don't have that coping mechanism, that at the core, we have the same pain as the person that we judge. And that's where we judge ourselves. So those kinds of emotions can come up when you get into the core of this. You start to have this huge realization that the thing that you were disgusted in another person lives within us as well. So it's a really intense process. It can cause, a lot of heat, a lot of shaking, a lot of fear to come up in those moments. That's part of the process. If you breathe through this unconditional love practice, you will get to the other side of it. You're not just bringing this on so that you can wallow in, misery forever. So when it comes up, you're creating a new relationship to it. You're creating a new perception. So now that we recognize the brain is trying to tell us, I'm not letting this go, I'm really scared, you're like, I understand. It's your job to protect me. I understand that you're telling me all of these things to stop me from stepping into love, because if love takes over, then my ego, whose job it is to survive, the ego is not evil. It's confused that it's separated from love. It's its job to survive. So don't shame it. Just go, I understand. I'm right here. I can see you. I'm looking right at you. We don't fight. We don't run. We don't rescue. We don't numb. We don't do any of those old coping mechanisms and roles. We look right at it and say, I see you. And in this moment, if you're having difficulty fully becoming aware of that part of yourself, what we talked about is asking the divine to show you where the judgment lives within you. And with a lot of our clients we work with, helping them do that through lucid dream time. So right before you go to bed, intend and expect the divine alliance of the light, the universe, to assist you and say, I would like to have a dream, and I'm completely willing to meet the divine halfway because I want to surrender this. Show me where the judgment lives within me. And even if you think you have this fully unveiled, do that anyway, because you can get some amazing insights that really help you look right at the very core of this. So ask to see the judgment. And once you become aware of the judgment and you're owning it, you're realizing this is keeping me from my power. It is not of benefit to me. I do not want to keep this anymore. This is sabotaging many areas of my life. And it's time for it to go. And I know that I'm being supported to do that. So in that moment, what you need to do when you're looking right at it is, whether you're seeing anger, unworthiness, hopelessness, no matter what you see, that depth of vulnerability and pain, fear, you look right at it and you say, sweet one, I'm right here with you. I'm not going anywhere until I see the truth and love you unconditionally, exactly as you are, There is nothing to fix or change. And so we also don't do that process alone. That's another intention. It's part 2 of your intention of meeting spirit halfway is show me, mentor me, universe, the light, mentor me. How do I open my heart and love this exactly as it is? Because we will make ourselves crazy if we keep fighting it and resisting it. And we recognize that that is a futile process, and that seeking externally is always going to fail. And that will only compound our shame and compound the power that we give away to this old story. So we ask, I don't yet know how to love this. I do recognize that I feel resistance and judgment and shame around this. And I completely devote myself to the higher love that I am, showing me exactly how to love this. Mentor me. I'm willing to go on that journey. Show me the truth right now. There's nothing more important than being completely present with this. I make that commitment. Show me how to love this exactly as it is. Once you do that, that fragmented part will integrate, and the insight that comes in that moment cannot be denied. It is like stepping into the matrix or a brand new landscape. So that's what we talked about in the session. You feel a complete shift and knowing that you are a different being than you were. You have to go through that journey of the unknown, and it's uncomfortable because you're giving up all your old identities and structures that were built on this false belief that this core of love is missing inside of you. All your defense mechanisms, all your attempts at control and protecting yourself are compounded and entangled with that belief. And you have to let all of that go. It will feel like you're floating in some world of the unknown. And in that moment, like we said, this part of you will fight back. It will try to keep you there. And you just have to say, sweet one, I see you. I understand the pain. And I know that the voice of the love that I am in the core of my being, the sovereign love, the truth of who I am, it's the voice I'm going to give my power to. It will guide me. And I make that commitment again and again every time the habitual voices arise. This is literally shutting the neural pathway, breaking it at, before it can complete its mission, stopping it, and developing a new neural pathway. And if you practice this habitually over time and you stay consistent and devoted, that old neural pathway will no longer exist. The new one will develop around that space of unconditional love, peace, safety, that voice that is willing to just let you know what I open to the truth of loving this. No matter how vulnerable this piece inside of me is, I love it. This changed everything in my life, and I've done this practice a number of times as I've recognized distortions. It allowed me to open to love in miraculous ways and then have that love mirrored back to me. So this is the most empowering practice we can do, to really integrate a fragmented part and never have the pattern or the hook be out there to be grabbed and repeated once again. So we're healing it at the core. So those were the main pieces that we talked about. It does take a deep commitment, and this is a practice, and it does rewire the brain, and it allows us to override the survival mechanism of the brain that developed our beliefs, and we override that with the neocortex, which is the creative co-creator of the brain. Which recognizes the higher truth of who we are, the more evolved being that we are. We're unveiling who we already are, that love that we already are. So that's the practice, and it takes time. Stick with it, and you will see results. Be in that voice of compassion and unconditional love. You have two voices inside of you, and you can always access that other voice. It is a nurturing, loving voice, and it is a witness. It is impartial. It is unjudging. It doesn't hold on to a story of the past or the future. It is a pure presence inside of you. Let that voice speak to the wounded part, to the hurting part, and you can merge the two into one. Okay, so lots of blessings and love on the journey, and I hope that was helpful. And we'll connect soon to kind of do a follow-up and check-in about how that's going or what questions arise. And again, do these intentions with spirit around where's the judgment, and teach me the truth. How do I love this exactly as it is, as the second part. Do that right before bed with the intention of a dream. You might get it through symbols, in your waking life rather than a dream. But the insight will come. Your job is to listen for the answer. Your job is to know you're in a dialogue with this higher self or this divine force, this light. You're in an active dialogue, and your job in that relationship, like all dialogues, is to listen when it comes to share with you the insight, because it will assist you. Absolutely. That's its very job. Okay. Lots of blessings.